Welcome. I think it's a good time to start. Hopefully, everyone's here. Yep, I see a lot of expected participants in the that have joined, um, and also I see AD Mahesh here. That's great. Um, okay, so this is the first virtual interim for the NETMOD working group in 2025. Myself and Lou, co-chairs, and we are here to help run it. Let me go to the next slide. The note well. Um, so if you've, I think anyone who's been a member of the IETF for a while is pretty familiar with the note well. Chairs are not expected to try to interpret the note well. Everyone is encouraged to follow the links to familiarize themselves with the details of the note well. But it is a common thing that's said that anything that you say during the interim is considered a contribution to the IETF, and we thank you very much for that contribution. There's also the note really well. It's newer than the note well, and again, don't want to try to interpret it too much. Welcome to read the text when you have time. But the top level takeaway is that we're trying to run this as a professional meeting. Please keep all your comments, on point. And of course, we'll do what we can to moderate as needed. This session is being recorded, which is great because we can go back and review the recording and make sure we capture all the comments. But still, please help us take notes. The URL to the HedgeDoc note-taking tool has been posted. I don't know, maybe Lou, you can help me out. I don't think that page has been initialized just yet, so possibly initialize it so people have something to type into. And yes, so everyone, it'd be helpful if folks could help us with the note-taking. All right, agenda bashing, and this is really the last slide. So the purpose of this virtual interim is to discuss templates. As you may recall, there was a special session at IETF 121 where we, for an hour, discussed the topic of templates, and it was, I think, by all accounts, it was a good session. And we then generated a GitHub issue tracker, the template requirements issue tracker, to try to capture the requirements that were, that we thought. Well, and actually, that was I think it was a comment from Andy Bierman, who made, he posted to the list and said, before we do anything, we should have requirements, and I thought that was a very good suggestion. And so we started to collect the requirements with the hope that then, we can, as a working group, have consensus on the requirements, and then move to the next steps of possibly publishing an RFC. As there's no planned, again, this is agenda bashing, so I'm just kind of going free form at the moment, and others are welcome to add to what I'm about to say. But there is no planned presentations per se for this session. It is my intention, or if no one suggests otherwise, to actually share my screen with the issue tracker, and issue by issue, discuss the issue. And at the conclusion of discussing the issues, have a show of hands, hum, do we agree or not agree with that requirement? And hopefully then, and I forget how many issues there are. Oh, hold on a second, I can find that out real fast. 16 open issues. So we would potentially have 16 show of hands, and then that would give us great record for what was the consensus from this virtual interim. So I'll pause there for a second to see if anyone else has any ideas. If you think that's a good idea, and anyone wants to join the queue. Yeah, hi Jason.
Hi, Jason Stern from Nokia. I was thinking that was a great way to go through it as well, Kent, since there was already some kind of preparatory work done by a few members of the working group on those issues. So
Perfect. Thank you. Any other agenda bashing? All right. Well, in that case, I'm going to stop sharing slides and see if I'll successfully share my screen. Yeah, the infinite zoom. Okay, so I can no longer see Meet Echo because I'm now looking at the GitHub. Can people see the GitHub, my GitHub window?
yeah, I see your GitHub window.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, so there are 16 open issues. They're currently sorted, starting with the oldest to the newest. And by the way, I mean, I guess you could say the oldest ones were the most obvious or the most intuitive, and then they got successfully more granular. So maybe that's one way to think about it. But beyond that, there's no real rhyme or reason to the ordering of the issues. So I guess we can start with the first one. And I guess, if people don't mind, I know some issues have comments. This particular issue has no comments. But for all the issues, let me go back and look at the, so one issue has 8 comments, one issue has 6 comments. Oh, this issue has 9 comments. But, for the most part, there's not too many comments. I think for the sake of consistency, for each issue, I'll just try to read out the whole issue, including the comments. Hopefully that's not too annoyingly slow, but I don't know how else to do this. All right, so this issue, number 1, is wherever a template reference can occur, more than one template reference can occur. So this requirement enables configuration through composition. That is, that the total configuration for some nodes and its descendants may come from more than one template. For example, assuming Gang for data model for 3D graphics may require all objects to have color, material, and a texture defined. But the data model did not define an ability for the color, material, texture to be referenced, i.e. there's no leaf ref from like an object container to such other lists. They're just leafs, and with like mandatory true. But it would become tedious to explicitly set the same texture, color, material on many objects, and hence it may be desirable to have a template to define a color, a template to define a texture, and a template to define a material, and to have the many objects refer to one of each kind of template to get their final configuration. So hopefully that makes sense. Non-requirement is implicit in this requirement is the need to define a rule for how overlaps and collisions are handled. For instance, the templates may be ordered or prioritized with the last one wins approach. Alternatively, if the overlap collision regards a list, it could be that the lists are merged. In any case, the requirement does not pick what approach may be used, leaving that decision to be made elsewhere. All right, so I'll stop there for now, open it up for conversation, and if at the end of that, we'll do a show of hands. And Lou, again, I'm not looking at the Meet Echo. If you can, yeah, okay. Yeah, Jason, go ahead.
Hey, Kent. So Jason Stern, Nokia. So I kind of like that you tried to separate out issue by issue here, and that the let's say precedence is going to be a separate issue. There may even be a subtlety in this one that may need to be broken down further, and I can't remember if I raised an issue to do it. So one is just to be concrete, like if you take a particular element in the data model, one aspect of more than one template is that you could have like an apply groups statement or whatever, or an application statement that contains multiple templates in that one statement. In other words, you could have a container, you can say, at this container, I want to apply group foo and group bar. So that's one aspect. Then there's the other aspect that is, if there's a container, I go back to my container, that container may have multiple templates applied to it, either directly at its element or from ancestor elements. So I'm not sure if we need to separate this requirement actually into two, and I don't know which one you mean here. So there's the fact that a given element can have multiple templates that apply to it, and then there's, can you apply multiple templates at an element? And those are two slightly different things, I think.
Sure. Okay, so for clarification purposes, it's more the former than the latter. The idea was using your example of apply groups foo and bar. So that the fact that that there is a foo, bar, and a baz, there's a list of templates that can be told or specified to apply to the node. That is the intention.
Sure.
You bring up a good point, though, and I don't believe that there is an issue for it. And actually, in a moment, I'll go back and we'll just look at all the titles of the issues. But I don't believe there's an issue for it. And I think if I can understand your the comment, it's that like you have in your configuration data model a hierarchy. So let's just say like 3 levels. So
Yeah, I
not to
use the
pick on
term
foo bar baz
ancestor,
again,
right?
but like foo is the top level, and then bar is underneath it, and baz is underneath it. And foo is it's inheriting some templates, and the templates that foo inherits affects bar baz. But then at the bar level, it also is saying that it wants to inherit some templates, and so now there's this combinatorial effect. It's a different kind of combinatorial
Yeah,
effect.
exactly.
Okay, great, perfect.
So
I
yeah,
don't
so we'll need to
know.
separate that. Just one
Yep, yeah.
further thing, Kent.
Mhm.
Just as inherently in this, you mentioned something about precedence. So I don't know if we'll also need, I don't know if we'll have one precedence issue to cover those two cases, but we might, because I know some common implementations, just as a simple example, is when you can specify multiple templates on one apply group statement. I know multiple implementations that actually the first one takes precedence, but when you have the ancestors, the embedded container, it's the innermost that takes precedence. So,
Yeah.
which might be quote the later. So we'll have to be a bit careful about how we, I think, even describe the precedence for those two different cases. It might be different. It
Yeah.
is in many implementations today.
Sure. Yeah, I think okay, so the issue itself is what we're talking about now, the precedence is in this non-requirements section. So I think it's just more
Yes,
non-requirements, but your point is very good. And it does need to be discussed and determined. And actually, I like the solution you just mentioned. It makes sense to me. It seems intuitive, but it's not captured by this issue.
got it.
And so we can probably move ahead with this issue, and maybe we need to create another issue. Again, I don't think there's any issue that really talks about the whole precedence issue, and I don't even know if I want to create an issue to talk about precedence. But what we may want to do is to create an issue. How can we say hierarchical template application? Like where I was saying, like you have the foo bar baz is like like foo is the top level, bar is underneath foo, and baz is underneath bar. And you could have the apply groups. Well, I'm just throwing it out there using your word. Apply group statement at each of those levels. And so that's kind of like hierarchical template application. And I don't believe there's a requirement yet that says that the templates can be applied at any node in a hierarchy, even if an ancestor node had already had a template applied. So we may want to add a requirement for that. Let's go to the list of requirements and just read out the titles so that we all have a good level set.
Kent, you have Deepak in queue.
Oh, thank you. Yes, Deepak?
Yep.
Yeah, thanks. On the precedents, I think I was going to refer to one more requirement listed in the list. There is one on the ordered by. So I think that could help in discussing the precedents. And the second point I wanted to just check was, I mean, among these requirements, are we doing during the show of hands, are we doing a yes or no, or do we set some priorities for these requirements? Do we need it? Do we set a kind of a high priority, medium, something like that, or just a yes or no?
I'll do it in reverse order. So the show of hand tools is binary. We can couch the question however we like, but the most obvious thing is to, do you agree with requirement number one? And
Okay.
then everyone can either select a yes, no, or don't care, or they
Okay.
don't choose. They choose not to specify it. Okay, so that's that, and then. And then the other thing you mentioned, order by. Can you say just a little bit more about that? Like, what do you mean the order by? I do understand that there's an issue with how do you merge lists or ordered lists. I know that's an issue that could arise in the context of templates. Although it probably
No,
arises already.
I was meaning which takes the precedence. I mean, what I mean is when we talk about if we have multiple templates, the last one gets applied, the last template, right? So in that sense, I think it was listed as one of the requirements. I'm not sure which one, but I remember reading about that.
Okay. So hold on. Then this might require more discussion. Thank you for. So you said the last one. So in the example that Jason mentioned before with foo, bar, baz, they're like it's a list. So the idea is that all three templates would be applied to the node, or that's the one understanding. And that was my understanding. But if I take it for what you're saying, you think it's maybe just the last one. So only baz is being applied. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about applying templates on the same, let's say, node, the last one applies. But if you're talking about mutually exclusive, no, if the templates are being applied on mutually exclusive nodes, then I think it doesn't really matter, right? I mean, we're talking about different nodes here. But if
Yeah,
it's on the
that'd be
same
different.
node, yeah.
Yeah, well, this issue, I mean, as it's written in its title, wherever a template reference can occur, more than one template reference can occur. Okay, so I guess that's just saying more than one reference can occur. It doesn't actually state that all those references are being applied, but that was the intention. In the example of the description with the material, texture, and color, the idea was that you're inheriting the material template, and you're inheriting the color template, and you're inheriting the material template. So anyway, that was my intention. Maybe we need to change the title of it so it's more clear. But before I do that, or does anyone else want to, do people think that it should, like, if there's more than one template reference, that all those templates are being applied, and there's some precedents that we have to figure out, or is it just the last one, and like whatever your precedence rules are, and then the last one is picked and only that one is applied? And I can't see the queue, so Lou, if you can.
Jason, go
Stern,
ahead.
I'm next. Thanks. Jason Stern, Nokia. So I guess we're kind of drifting into the non-part of the issue, which is the president's resolution. So I guess first of all, I mean, my gut is we should allow multiple templates to be specified at a particular node. In other words, apply groups foo space bar. I think is okay, and I think it's kind of common in a bunch of implementations. And my feeling is also that they would all apply, and we have to define some precedence rules. So if you're applying foo and bar and they both set the MTU to different values, well, we need to decide which one takes effect. But those two templates may set totally different things. Like in your example in the description of your issue, Kent, you talk about one template would assign certain characteristics and the other would apply other, and you would definitely want them both to apply to that node. So I mean, at a top level, I support the idea of applying multiple templates at a given node, and they all take effect with some precedence rules.
Okay. Anyone else in the queue?
Rob had a good comment in chat, basically saying it's more than precedence. You also have to be able to allow different values. And Rob, if you don't like my paraphrasing, please jump in.
Okay, yes. I was just sort of making the comment that actually, rather than dealing with precedence between different templates applied at the same level, one easy solution, or one, not necessarily easy solution, one solution is to say, if you have two templates applied at the same point, and they both write to the same data node or create the same thing, they're required to write the same value. So you basically disallow, when you're applying those templates, it'd be an error to try and apply multiple templates where the templates themselves are setting different values. I'd still allow a non-template config to override it, but you could just say with the templates themselves, you can't end up with this different two templates trying to write the same value and requiring precedence between the two to resolve that. It's just a way of trying to simplify the system. I do think, just looking at the requirements in general, I have a view of, I think we should try hard to make sure we focus on what's the core minimum subset of functionality that really matters first and what things are nice to have. And we don't build a solution that is too complex here overall. Thanks.
Okay, well, so I think I just heard two different ideas, like Rob saying that if you have two templates applying to the same node, they have to have the same value. But I think Jason just a moment ago said that they could have different values, and that's why you need to have rules for precedence and which one overrides the other. And I think, Jason, maybe your example was with an MTU. But
yeah, Jason's in queue. I would say let's try to be a little loose with the formal floor control. There's not a huge number of people here. So if you're in queue and you hear the person is finished, just jump in.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I accidentally just dropped myself out, but I'll go back in here. Jason Stern, Nokia. I guess I'm supportive of, so simplifying is one thing, but I'm not sure that having to detect different values and error is necessarily any more simple than having precedence rules. And I guess my feeling is, from what I'm familiar of prior art of implementations out there, I'm familiar with at least multiple major ones, not just not Nokia's, that it's sometimes useful to have templates that can collide, because sometimes you're going to apply a generic template, say, to all interfaces. I'll give the simple example with, I don't know, some QoS policy and a bunch of other parameters, but then you want to apply another template to a set of your 5 gold interfaces that's going to just override a few of those parameters. I've seen that kind of thing done in practice. So I'm still kind of supportive of allowing multiple templates to be applied and to resolve through precedence rather than detect the differences in error.
so I don't hear anyone else, and thank you, Lou, for opening up the. Oh, please go ahead.
Can I have a comment? Can I go ahead?
Yes.
Yeah, so in general, I am also supportive of this requirement that we should be able to refer multiple templates to create an instance or to create, but then of course, when you instantiate, if you have conflicting data nodes, you somehow have to merge it. And then you have to define precedence, or is it some restriction that's the way that Rob said, isn't this outside the scope of the requirement? Isn't it more implementation? So how do we resolve the precedence? As you said, it should not be part of the requirement, right?
Well, I mean, okay, so this requirement number 1, is just trying to say that there can be multiple references, and I'm trying to further strengthen that statement by saying that each of those references are in fact being applied. It's not just the last reference that's being applied. So I may change the title in a moment. But there's another thing, which is the non-requirements. So this is the business of having the, so this requirement is not trying to say anything about the solution for precedence or whatever. But certainly if an RFC were to be published, it would have to be fully explained, and
Yes.
so that for interoperability purposes, everyone has the same understanding of how it works.
Yeah. So for the sake of moving forward, for the requirement aspect, I think whether we agree that whether multiple templates have to be referred or not, that's the requirement. And how do we solve the conflicts can be handled when we do the real implementation or the solution in the RFC.
Yeah, that's
What I
correct.
feel.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm going to edit the title and say it's not only they can occur, and I'll say and applied, and they are applied. Okay, so now it's very much the case that it's like all the templates are being applied, and it's not just the last one. For whomever it felt before that was they only wanted the last one. When the show of hands happens, you can decline to agree with the requirement. Okay, so I was a moment ago about to go through all the lists. I do want to do the show of hands for that one, but first I just want to make sure we go over all the requirements so people are aware of how this requirement stands in relation to the others. So the second requirement says templates must be able to reference other templates, so hierarchical templates. 3 is templates must work with any data model, including augments and deviations. 4, templates must be validated when defined, not only when used. 5 is whenever a template reference can occur, it must be possible to delete nodes from the template. A little small typo there. 6, possibility to override the values defined by a template. Okay, so this is a little bit of what we were just talking about a moment ago, overriding. And I mean, okay. And that can be done 2 ways, right? I think Rob made a comment about how the actual data node instance itself could have local configuration, and that overrides any value that you inherit from any template. But then there's also templates overriding values that are inherited from other templates, and that's the whole precedence business, whether or not the templates are in the same list or it's hierarchical in the tree. But anyway, it kind of, this number 6 leads a little bit to that discussion. 7, modifiability of data within a template, living templates. Okay, we got 2 that said living templates, but I think, living template. Okay, so this means that it's long-lived. It's not just apply one, apply and forget. It's more living. Okay, 8, support basic programmatic elements in templates. This one's interesting. It's a small language, a small little scripting language that can be used. 9, templates can be applied at various nodes in the schema. Okay, so again, that's a little bit touching on that hierarchical. And maybe we need to put a non-requirement in here where it's not trying to solve the precedence issue of what that means. 10, for living templates, the configuration with both unexpanded and expanded templates is available to be returned. 11, possibility to reorder some user order leaf list entries defined in a template. 12, the running data store contains the unexpanded template. 13, the intended data store contains the expanded template. 14, off-box validation of running containing templates must be possible. 15, the intended data store does not contain the template themselves. And then 16, common data nodes. And actually, I'm not sure what this one is. But anyway, so that's the full list. And so now, going back to 1, and Lou, can you help me, Lou, like set up the polls, and we could just keep it simple. Like, do you agree with requirement number 1? And we don't have to write down the whole title.
Kent, just one heads up. I did add a comment to 1 just to clarify that you meant it's, apply groups foo bar baz at one node, not my second case. So hopefully that matches what what we both kind of decided
Yep.
at the beginning.
Correct. Exactly. Thank you. Let's
To
see.
answer your question, apparently I'm having trouble getting to the queue, the poll.
Okay.
It moved again, or at least I'm not finding it.
It's at the top. It's the second to the left, as you can see my
Oh,
screen.
yeah, the icon changed or something. I don't know. Maybe it's just my memory. Thanks.
Okay, well, I'm doing the first one, requirement number 1, and you
Okay.
can help me with the rest. Okay. Okay. All right. Since everyone can see my screen, you know how I voted.
I'm not seeing the poll for some reason.
Look at the top of the screen. Like in the middle of the top of the screen, there's a little.
Okay, I found it. My apologies.
Okay. I see it's unanimous so far, but I'm going to move back to the requirement screen so it's not the infinite zoom. And Lou can close off the poll when he feels it's ready.
Yeah, I think we have 14 of 15 participating, so I'm going to close the poll.
Thank you. Okay, requirement number 2. Templates must be able to reference other templates, hierarchical templates. Requirement. This requirement is enable templates to themselves reference other templates. And notice it's possible plural. So it's, I mean, again, there could be, going to the previous requirement, there could be more than one. Note, whether a template can reference one template or a list of templates is address number 1. Ha, I got ahead of myself. Non-requirement. Implicit in this requirement is a need to define a rule for how overlaps collisions are handled. Though a common approach understanding is to allow local overrides, this requirement does not pick what approach may be used, leaving that decision to be made elsewhere. So this is perfect. I think this is exactly what we were talking about in the previous discussion. There are some comments. Jason wrote back in November, this feels overly complex to me. Being able to compose a config using multiple templates is good. And same with being able to apply various schema nodes, which is number 9, and probably good enough in most use cases of templates. And then Robert Wills on Jan 7, about a month ago, says, I think this adds complexity for several reasons. Making sure templates don't reference each other in a circular way. When combined with issue number 1, there are now 2 ways that the contents of a template can collide. That's true. We talked about that before, like 2 different ways of doing precedence. And then last bullet point is needing to specify and implement validation for when a referenced template doesn't exist. Of course, this is already the case, but now we have an extra situation where one template may reference another that doesn't exist. And then lastly, I agree with Jason that 1 and 9 are good enough for most use cases. Okay, so those were all the comments that the issue and the comments. Any discussion people want to have before we move to a show of hands?
Since I'm the only one in the queue, I'll talk. Jason Stern, Nokia. I guess, yeah, just this is one where keeping it a little more simple, I would recommend for us. You know, if some vendors want to go off and allow this, it could be kind of, you know, extended functionality, but for a base spec, like I know, you know, I don't think this is required in my opinion. So I'd rather keep it simple on this one.
I'm trying to think about the motivation behind this use case, and I guess it's a little bit like your example, Jason, of the QoS policy with a gold. I mean, and you were saying that in the context of a list of templates on a node, but it could also be composed or construed as being through hierarchical templates, where let's say you have a device. The device is part of a family of devices. So being ex-Juniper, I'll pick on a Juniper device, call it the SRX 300, which is a firewall. So the SRX 300 is obviously it can pull from an SRX specific template. Sorry, an SRX 300 specific template. The SRX 300 template could pull from an SRX generic template, so it doesn't really matter what kind of SRX it is. It's any SRX, but any, so the 300 SRX 300 could pull from the SRX generic. The SRX generic could pull from a Junos generic template, and then maybe the Junos generic template pulls from a deployment-wide type template. So it's a different way of doing the composition, and I think it's like more dry, like don't repeat yourself, in the sense that if I were to then have another SRX 300, I would only need to point it to the SRX 300 template, and then it automatically inherits the stack of templates that, everything that's involved with. So I think that's the motivation behind this requirement. I don't know if that is convincing or not, but I just wanted to explain. Is anyone in the queue? Or I don't hear anyone. Maybe we should do the show of hands then. Oh.
So this one seems quite mixed. To me, it seemed like more of an implementation approach to hierarchy so more of a solution than a requirement. And that's why I actually did not respond either way.
Okay.
But either way, no matter what, I think the outcome of this one needs more discussion.
Yeah, I agree with that, and also, and I see my Hutch is in the queue, but also, it'd be nice to know if the reason why people are saying no is because they disagree with the requirement, or they disagree with the extra complexity that trying to accommodate this requirement now versus like it's a good idea, but we could do it later. So that's unclear to me. My Hutch, please.
It sounds like you're asking people who've said no to
Correct.
come to the mic and explain.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, I was confused too, in terms of, are we polling to keep the requirement simple, or is it that, yeah, basically, are we polling on the requirement, keeping, as Jason described, keep it simple for now?
Not exactly, because the requirement says let's allow embedded templates. So, and I think we were voting for the requirement. So maybe there was some confusion over the poll.
No, I think the requirement is clear. But the why is that the no is unclear. Is it, and maybe this just goes to what Lou was saying, we need more discussion. And through that extra discussion, we'd figure out people, they like vehemently disagree with the requirement, in which case I'd love to know if there's anyone that's in that camp right now. Or if it's just an issue of complexity not needed now, we could do it in a future like 2.0 type update to this document.
Jason Stern, next in the queue here. Yeah, I'm not vehemently opposed to the idea, Kent, and the use case you described. I could see sure being possible, but I'm very wary of us going down roads of over complexifying some of our proposals. Maybe I'm feeling a little burnt from some other work that's been happening that I've been involved in. So I'm definitely much more on the road to keeping things a little bit more simple, especially if it's more aligned to a number of common implementations out there today. So I think that'll lower the barrier to getting this work done. So yeah, I'm not strongly opposed to it, but I'd rather keep it simple for a basic draft of this.
All right, thank you.
I was just going to comment as well. Actually, my comments almost mirror Jason's exactly effectively, is that I would like us to focus on a minimal solution that solves the necessary requirements, as in let's focus on the core set of requirements that must-haves. We will need those, and then build on those if we find other cases and examples. But if, for example, we ended up with the example 1 where you could apply multiple templates at the same layer, that may be sufficient to not need this one of having hierarchical templates, which in their very nature sound more complex to me. So again, I just urge folks to sort of drive for less complexity for the initial solution, and then we can always add more complexity in. Otherwise, if we end up with very complex solutions, you'll find that people don't implement them, or only implement subsets of them, and don't end up with the sort of interoperability that we're all aiming for.
Yeah. Yeah, and the example I gave before with the XRX 300, assuming that actually I have an instance of a device in my configuration data model, and there's no hierarchical templates, I can only specify a list of templates. And furthermore, we agree that the precedence is that the most generic is at the beginning of the list and the most specific is at the end of the list. Then in my example, the list could be deployment generic space Junos generic space SRX generic space XRX 300, and it would effectively give you that same composition that you would have had if there was hierarchical templates. Okay, well, I think we have our result from the poll. Thank you, and we can move to the next requirement. Number 3. Templates must work with any data model, including augments and deviations. This requirement ensures that any data model can be templatized even if augmented or deviated. This requirement implies that the template solution is orthogonal to data models and hence applicable to all existing, already published Yang modules. There are some comments. I'm not sure who this is, but it would be better to word this as work with any Yang module. When I see data model, I think beyond Yang. I might even consider CLI to be in scope. Okay, definitely not talking about CLI. This is Yang. We're talking about Yang models here. Oh, see, I got ahead of myself again. Maybe data model isn't the best, but I'm unsure if Yang module is better. Perhaps collection of Yang modules to accommodate augments and deviations, and then wrote back. That's fair. Okay. Any comments, discussion on this item? All right, so I'll just add to this. I think the implicit in the outcome of this requirement is that the templates cannot be data model specific. So for instance, if I have a template for interfaces, I'm sorry, let me start over. If there's a Yang module that like let's pick on RESTconf client server. So I have a Yang module for RESTconf client server, specifically the IETF RESTconf server. So that is a Yang module, and the goal is that without any effort on part of the IETF or any other, like a template could be made for IETF RESTconf server. We don't need to publish an RFC called the IETF RESTconf server template, right? We're not going to republish every Yang module, a template version of every Yang module. It's just, that is a non-goal. Like the idea is that the solution, the template solution works seamlessly, immediately, transparently, generically, whatever word you want to throw at it, with all Yang modules, both published and to be published, future published, and even accommodates possible augmentations or deviations that are occurring. Okay.
Deepak is in queue.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So, so here we are talking about when we say any data model, we essentially we are referring to, let's say, a defined schema model, and not. I'm not saying. I mean, we are not talking about some abstract model here, right? Which cannot be, or which is not defined, or which cannot be validated. Meaning, if we are talking about, let's say, IETF interfaces, then I'm talking about IETF interfaces template, not necessarily an something new, which I'm going to call as IETF interfaces template. But what I'm saying is I could directly templatize IETF interfaces rather than saying I'm going to templatize something which could, by the way, be IETF interfaces as well. I'm not saying that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. I agree with that statement.
Yeah.
So I'm in queue as contributor. I think you should change the title to be Yang module, because then it's completely unambiguous.
Fine. Yang defined data model.
How about Yang module?
Okay.
A Yang module is completely unambiguous, right? What's your issue with it's module versus model?
Nope. It's not an issue. Let's move forward.
Okay, thanks.
Just spike shedding. Any other comments, or move to the show of hands? Probably need to move to the show of hands if we're going to get through all 16 requirements.
So I think that's sufficient to show there's good support for this. I think we can move on to the next one.
Excellent.
Keeping in mind your comment about time.
Yes, I'll try to move faster. Templates, number 4, templates must be validated when defined, not only when used. Okay, this one's going to be interesting. A requirement. This requirement validates templates at the time that they are defined, as opposed to only when they are used. Since templates must be defined prior to being referenced, this means that unreferenced templates are validated. Non-requirement. Implicit in this requirement is that templates would have to be model specific. Their Yang is known in order to be validated. Requirements for how the data model for a template would be known are not specified here, leaving those requirements to be specified elsewhere. Jason writes, should we differentiate here between basic syntax validation, such as right type or range, versus semantic validation, including like mandatory and min elements statements? Perhaps we should. And then Robert mentions or says, I commented in 15 also, I'm struggling on why the intended data store should not contain the template. Okay, that's a different item regarding the intended data store. Okay, please keep comments with each issue requirement. Okay, yeah, so that previous comment belongs in number 15, and I think it is number 15. And then Robert writes, expanding on Jason's point, perhaps we should distinguish between 2 different cases of validation failure. Any possible instantiation of the template would result in the expanded template config that does not validate. In this case, the template is not allowed. This would cover basic type and range checks. And then some instantiations of the template would be valid, others invalid. In this case, the template is allowed. All right. I'm not sure if people are in queue already, but I'll just quickly comment. I actually added this requirement, not agreeing with it. Because I don't understand how a template that hasn't been referenced can be validated. By nature, almost the definition of the template is it can be sparse. It's purposely not specifying all nodes, all leafs, even if the leaf is said to be mandatory true, because the expectation is that the composition of templates and or local config will produce the final expanded config, which would then be subject to standard validation. So certainly I understand as soon as a template has been applied, then the expanded or flattening of the template can be done, and that result can be validated. Prior to a template being applied, I don't know how it's possible for the server to reason about it, which is why I'm personally not too strong in this requirement. Any other comments?
Hi, Ken, this is Shia from Nokia. So for me, I think this is essential to be supported because for me, the two main goals that I want to achieve by using templates is to gain the performance and the performance can be because of the validation and the device, and then the memory gain. So if I talk about the performance, and then if you see what validations that we can do inside a template, suppose you have a device which has, let's say, different type of interfaces, and then your Ethernet interface must be augmented with some set of data and for an access node, and coming from an access, there can be PON interfaces which are augmented with PON specific data. Now, if I'm creating a template for an interface of type Ethernet CSMAC-D, and if I'm creating a PON specific data node, it must be validated. It's an invalid data. It's inconsistent. Why do we need to keep such data in a template saying that it's Ethernet, but then you misconfigure with a PON specific data node there? So I think it's essential that we validate to some extent the templates. To an extent it's possible. Yeah.
Any other comments?
My point is, okay, even I do think it is essential because even template is in itself a configuration, right? And the moment I configure something, I would expect it to be correct and not wait until something is or a template consumer is referencing to that. So it's more like you get to know that you have done something wrong up early, fail fast. So
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Yeah. Okay. You guys are convincing me just a little bit here. Maybe the concern is the word validated in the title. Must be, but like, what do we mean by validated? And to Jason's point, like differentiating. I mean, certainly we know that the template, like the nodes in the template must be nodes that exist in the actual data model, right? Through all the Yang modules that are implemented by the server. It has to be, the nodes have to be in that data model. It can't be just anything else. So certainly it makes sense, like just a quick check to make sure that like all the nodes are known. They're known nodes. And maybe that their values are like, if it's supposed to be a string but it's a number, like, okay, you can do simple checks. But so this word validated is I'm thinking strong validation, which is not possible, but maybe best effort validation is, I could be on board with that.
Rob Wills. Yeah, I think that ties into my comment where I was trying to separate the two different kinds of validation errors. And so I guess using your language, Kent, the sort of best effort validation would be if there was no way that this template could be applied anywhere and be valid, then we could sort of fail fast. But there's always going to be cases where a template or combination of templates instantiated in a particular place doesn't validate, like the combination doesn't validate. And I guess that's the strong validation that you can only do when it's been instantiated.
Okay. Yeah, I've updated the title to add the word best effort after validated, so it qualifies it. And furthermore, this would probably, like from an RFC perspective, it would simply have a statement like implementation should use best effort to validate the template when it's defined. But then it'd be on a per implementation basis, how far do they take it? Some implementations may not do much validation at all. Others, perhaps they could just do node existence tests. Others might do value type, tests. It's probably they could get, more and more sophisticated, and it would be, but I don't think the RFC itself would specify how, or maybe it would. I guess that's open to discussion. How specific would the RFC be in the validations that must occur? But in any case, that's not what we need to decide right now. It's just whether or not templates must be validated best effort when defined.
Jason Stern, Nokia. I think so it may be a little tricky to vote on this one, Kent, just because I think at a high level, my opinion is in order to make this again kind of have a good chance of getting through, I think we would have to avoid having strict rules on you must fully validate. And I think Rob Wills and I are in rough alignment, but I want to be a little bit careful that I wouldn't want strict language that would have to conform to Rob's wording, that an implementation has to detect and go through every possible instantiation and make sure it's possible, because that could be a burden. So
Sure.
I like your kind of your compromise of saying kind of you should do some basic validation, but I would really advocate we are careful around putting any strict requirements on what the validation is and how much you do.
Yeah, agreed. And that was my last comment as well. Okay.
So I'm uncomfortable with the term best effort. I think we have a couple more people in queue.
Okay.
I'm uncomfortable with best effort because to me, if I'm an implementer and I'm worried about just implementation time, I'll do nothing. So how do you feel or people feel about semantic validation? So you validate against the model, not against the data elements.
Do you mean syntax? Because that's the wording I put in the issue.
I'd be okay with syntax. There's a little difference, but I think syntax is fine. I was going one step beyond that.
Well, I don't think we can do semantic validation for, again, the mandatory min elements, because almost by definition, templates are sparse. They won't necessarily always define everything that is mandatory, or so that is probably not possible. But syntax validation, I think, is in line with the examples I gave earlier. Like, it is a known node. It's the node has the right type.
Yeah, that works for me, and it's much cleaner or clearer than best effort.
Okay.
I'm generally opposed to having standards with loose options. Requirements are much better. Okay, thanks.
Yep. So I'll change it now. I'll say template syntax, if that's okay with wording. Syntax must be validated when defined. Is that good?
Works for me. You got a couple of other people in queue.
Yep. Go ahead. Maybe they're waiting for us to pick on.
Oh, I didn't realize Robert had dropped off. Yeah, so actually my comments were exactly what Luke brought up, which is I don't know how you can write a PS, a proposed standard, sorry, with words like best effort. I think the RFC would almost require you to specify exactly what you want validated, what you cannot validate. So
Yep.
I'm glad, Luke, for bringing that you
Yeah.
brought it up.
Okay.
And I was going to say that I see this very much as a nice to have rather than a must have, maybe a should or a may, in the sense that I think we need to be careful that we don't say, yes, this is a must have thing, and then we constrain the solution space because of this requirement, when in fact, it might be we end up with a better solution space by having this as a nice thing to do rather than we have to do it. So I think we need to be careful when we vote for this in terms of what we're voting for.
Yeah, it's going to be the same as the other. I expect the no's would be some combination of people who are vehemently opposed to the requirement and also just don't want the complexity now, which is fine. It will cause a split vote and more discussion, which is fine.
Yes, I guess I'm I'm not. I guess where I'm coming from is, I think it'd be nice for a solution. If a solution can cover this, that's great. Is it a requirement on all possible solutions to meet a decent templating solution? I'm not convinced of that one.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, I agree with you. I mean, like in terms of importance of this requirement, I don't see it as being highly important. Like easily, potentially not considered for the first pass. So, I mean, because ultimately, the template will be validated when it's applied, right? So this is all or mostly about when the template is being defined before it's been applied. And I almost don't care. Like if it's not being applied, it doesn't matter. It only matters when it's applied. And then of course the flattened expanded will be validated. And so there's the catch-all net right there. Hence this one's not too important.
I kind of, Jason Stern, I kind of feel the same way that I certainly don't mind if servers want to do, like a server can make their choice around this and have, I don't want to, I think we should avoid in the spec that there's a requirement to do anything strict here. That's all. So I like the idea of validating syntax, but I don't want to put a strong requirement on validating a template. So I'm actually not too sure how I'm going to vote for this because I like syntax. Yeah, sure. But I don't really want to force templates to be validated.
So I have a proposal for how we might be able to fix the polls. Instead of the polls saying, do you agree with the requirement? It could be, do you disagree with the requirement? Meaning you're, or maybe it doesn't help. I was hoping that it would be like, or how about, are you vehemently opposed to the requirement? Like, so it's very clear that, you like and I wish there was I wish we could do 3 options, but we only have a yes and no. I don't know. I don't have a better suggestion. Keep the poll the way it is. Oh, it's running now. I see.
I think it's actually done. Where it's well, now we're getting some more people. I guess calling out that it's running is a good thing.
Yeah.
So I'd say generally split, but more no's. Actually, the no's seem to be winning. But we do have a few yeses.
Yeah, but I was seesawing between the two, like hovering over both options. I could easily have.
Yeah,
yes.
I think requires more discussion is as good as we're going to get.
Yes, and
Right.
I'm hoping actually the more discussion will tease out the there's no one vehemently opposed. It's just the complexity is something we don't want to take on now. All right, so let's move to the next one. Number 5. Wherever a template reference can occur, it must be possible to delete nodes from the template. I'll just add the word to. Okay, so this requirement enables the consumer of a template to remove nodes from a template. For instance, a template may be perfect in many ways, but it sets a value for a leaf when the template consumer actually wants the leaf to use its default value. So this isn't the case where the consumer wants to override the value. Certainly it could override the value, and that would already be supported. But here's the case where they want to remove the value entirely. So there's no value, the leaf is undefined, and hence the default appears and used. Robert writes in November, just for my clarification, is that different from the capability to overrule a template value? Okay, so it is different. So we're talking about when the, so yes, it's different. Overriding is sets a value. So that's you're explicitly setting a value, and here are the cases where you're actually not setting a value. He gets it. Thank you. And then in case the node is not deleted by a template consumer, we will still have one or more value from the template 2 or more default. Okay, hold on. I'm not sure how to parse this. Can anyone help me with this? My next comment, I don't understand the question. Okay. He writes back, I'm looking at the scenario where the template consumers already are being managed by the same data model, maybe in mounted fashion, And if we now want to make these consumers derive from a common template, then we have a situation where we have a value coming from a template and the existing value from the same data model of each template consumer.
Kent, Deepak is in the queue to, I think, explain his
Yeah,
point.
please. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, so what I was referring here is I have a template, and let's say I have multiple template consumers who incidentally also have the same data model being managed, right? So on one side, I say from my template consumer that I want the data from this particular template, and then I want to override certain values, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at a mount, let's say I'm mounting the same model as the template in different template consumers. Then I need a facility to override certain values, and maybe to delete or to modify certain values, I would say.
Yeah, so that is already given here in requirement number 1, where, remember there's a non-requirement, like having to do with how we know there's a need to talk about precedence, but it wasn't being defined here. And then later on, in hierarchical templates, we again said there's a need for just, understanding precedence. And when we talk about precedence, we are talking very much about overriding, right? Where 2 different templates are providing the same, or even the final, like the actual configuration node itself is specifying a value, and so overriding the value that came from the template. So already we have in place solutions for overriding. This one is actually not trying to override a value; it's just simply trying to remove a value from a template. So
Can you clarify that in the non-requirements, maybe, Kent?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
Rob Wills, I think most of the usefulness of templates comes from being able to combine them together in an additive way and to override a value. But I think being able to delete a value that's come from a template, or sorry, delete a node that's come from a template is too complex.
Jason Stern, Nokia, I'm next in the queue and just was about to say the same thing. I think there's I think that's probably a step further than we need to go, is having like operators, action operators in templates. I think this will come up later too with some of the ordering for ordered by user lists, but I'd rather have, I'd rather try to keep operators out of these deletes and other tricky business like that.
And just I have the same view as both Rob Wills and Jason. Again, I know said let's try and keep it simple. Let's do the simple thing first, and if we find there's a requirement for the future, we'll know what the use case is and whether it's worth the cost and complexity of doing that.
So I've started a poll because I'm sensing a theme here in comments.
Oh, I'm sorry, folks. I terminated the poll. I'm sorry. Can you start it again, Lou? I'm so bad. Or maybe I can copy paste it. I'm sorry, everyone.
That's okay. I got it. Just give me a second. I think we knew the answer already, by the way.
Yeah, well, it was getting, okay. It was starting, and it was exciting. But
this is issue number 5, correct?
Yes. Yes, number 5. Thank you. And I mean, I know we're already doing the poll, but I'll just mention that the reason why this issue exists at all is because one or more of the presentations at IETF 121 had the idea of being able to delete nodes from a template.
And in fact, we have one supporter of this, so probably that person.
Probably could be that person.
That said, I think there's I would take it as there's not support for including this in the first batch of features, and from discussion, maybe future, but let's see if we need it.
Yep. I like that interpretation. I mean, it's just those who voted no are probably saying that from a complexity perspective, as opposed from being vehemently, disagreeing with it, and that's fine. Number 6, possibility to override the values defined by a template. Okay, so I think this is somehow redundant. Yeah. Okay. So Deepak wrote. In select scenarios, there might be a requirement to override the values of select nodes which are inherited from a template, i.e. to expanded tree, the expanded tree to contain the overridden value. All right, so this issue, I think it is like capturing the essence of the non-requirements from issues number 1 and 2, where we talked about precedents and all that. Like those were non-requirements, but this appears to be like the requirement, like that, like you can't do overrides without like talking about precedents. So I think this is probably that it's just the other half or the other side of the coin, if you will, to that. There are no comments on this issue, but I'll open it to see if anyone wants to discuss it.
Mike, a clarification question. Why is this not redundant with precedents?
Right. I was actually thinking of possibly closing the issue, if that's what people think is making sense, because it does seem to be.
Do we have a separate one for precedents?
No, it's just
maybe this becomes the precedents one.
Yeah,
like
I mean,
precedents and overrides the same thing. I was about to clarify that in the issue that like it could just include all 3 cases. One is, override in the base data model, override by multiple templates applying, and override by when you actually apply multiple templates at one node. So I mean, I think we could probably put that all together in here, the precedence rules.
Sure.
Can I just jump in on that one? I'd rather see them separately. As in, I think the one of having the explicit config overrider template is one use case. Another one of having hierarchy between templates is a different thing. I think it'd be better to have those as 2 separate rather than
okay, I'm fine. I'm fine with that either way.
So we were talking about the precedents, and now we are talking about the overriding. But for the precedents, I thought we were discussing about conflicting data nodes that are coming from multiple templates. But the override can also be outside a template. So you can apply multiple templates on a location, but then at the application place, you can still redefine the data node, saying that, okay, whatever that you come from the template, you ignore and override the value that is defined there. So it does not need any precedence there. So it's something else, right?
Yes, I think so. I'm just trying to capture. I think there's actually 2 precedence rules that we're talking about. There's node specific, where the node references multiple templates, and then hierarchical templates, where, I probably don't need to qualify, but it's issue number 2 is what it is.
Yeah, but it can be a third one where you ignore anything that comes from the templates, but take what is defined in the application, in the target data node.
Right. That's what's node specific. So if the node itself defines about, like, let's say MTU, so you're applying a template that sets the MTU, but the node itself is also setting the MTU, then the precedence would be that node's value it wins. But there's also maybe you're right. There's 2 different things. So if you have a list of templates, then the beginning of the list is most generic, and the ones at the end of the list are more specific. So, anyway, I think we kind of have our heads around what this requirement regards. A possibility to override the values defined by a template. I think it's clear. Should we start the poll now?
Wait, there's a bunch of people in queue.
Oh, sorry.
It's too fun. So just a comment. I think it's a different issue from the hierarchy templates and precedents. for example, if we can have some explicitly provided configuration that takes precedence over the template configuration, and just provide the local configuration explicitly, and then it overrides the config in the template.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. I'll try to. You're right. There's a third precedence rule item here. It's also kind of node specific, but let's call it or template ordering, right? In case there is a list of templates, they're ordered, and so the more specific template overrides more generic template. I think it's also part of number one, issue number one, but I'll just try to tease it out as. But yeah, I agree. That's.
Yeah, I was referring more towards the template consumer overriding the value coming from the template itself. So yeah, the first point that you mentioned, it as node specific, right? So that's more like template consumer. It could be a particular node. It could be a complete model as such, not necessarily one particular node there.
Yep. All right. Anyone else?
Yeah, Jason Stern. So I'm still feeling a little bit of differences in terminology people are talking about, and everyone's jumping on this because there's a lot tangled up in it. So Kent, I had suggested we could wrap up all the different precedences into this one issue, but I'm not sure if you caught it. Rob Wilton, right after me, said no, he'd prefer maybe to separate the precedents and override into multiple issues. We kind of need a term that we agree on for what the base local or template consumer config is. I don't know what you want to call it. The real config. I don't know if you have a term in mind for, because it seems to be the one that's the focus of this particular issue, and that is the base consumer, the main config, the real config. What do you want to call it? The non-template config. I don't. What we should come up with a term and use it in here. Local config, but I think this issue is primarily about the fact that local config takes precedence, or local config overrides any template config, and I'm not sure if that's described in actually any of your three bullets.
Maybe bullet one, where it says wherever a template reference can occur, more than one can occur. Oh,
well,
but
this says
your point
node
then,
reference multiple templates.
Yeah, no, good point. Yeah, even if we supported only a single reference to a template,
Exactly.
we still want it to be that the node can override it. So
exactly.
all right.
So I think the precedence rule, like number one here, should be, or this issue should be, that local config takes precedence and overrides.
Okay. So let's
I'm sorry to jump in. Can we just say the configuration data store?
Well, templates are in the configuration data store, so I'm not sure about that term.
So how about I'll change the title. Oop, I'm not editing the title. Local config overrides
template config.
Template config.
Yeah,
and that's distinct from.
I like that, and then the other precedence rules, maybe we move to other issues as Rob Wilton proposed.
Yes, I'll do that. I'll just delete them from here. Okay. Any other comments?
Robert,
yes. Robert Pesci from Nokia, from my smartphone. Yes, to emphasize just what has been said, I think it's important that we decouple this override from the possibility of several templates. So even if there is only one template, what's important is that the consumer has still the final word about what should be in the actual final configuration. But I think that's been commented already previously. So thank you.
Yeah. All right.
I think I'm next up. So I got lost in all your commenting, but I think this is a choice, and a template may be set up to override the config. So I think this is so optionally overrides template config is the requirement change that I'm asking for, the title change.
So
because
next
you may keep in mind that a template is also config, as Jason was just saying. So if I'm setting up a template that says I want to override this no matter what, that's a choice, and it's still a user's or operator's choice.
So
Okay.
Jason,
Well, oh yeah,
sorry.
please go ahead.
Okay. Do you want to? We're both jumping on this. Okay, you go ahead, then I'll come back in.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that the title is clear. It's not what Lou is asking for, but if Lou votes for this, he should vote no, because he wants it to, that there's like, he doesn't think that it should only be the case that local config can override template config.
I think in the general case, it should. I think there's a special case where it doesn't, and I think it should be under control. We should allow for that.
I mean, we could say local config overrides template config unless there is an explicit override flag or something like that.
Well, we'd almost need to vote on two things, like what options do you want for local config versus template? Fixed local wins, configurable local versus template. I would strongly advocate.
There's lots of solutions for it. I'm just saying that it is an option for it to not override. And whether that's a common option or an uncommon option, we can debate. I mean, I think it's an uncommon option, but I'm not sure. But I still think it's an option.
So I'm next in queue here. I had a different comment, but let me comment on this one first. Just from a simplicity point of view and from my knowledge of a few major implementations, I would rather keep it simple, not have that optional. I think it's quite common to have the local config be kind of the innermost and most applicable config to override everything. So I'd rather it be fixed myself. The other comment I was going to make, and I don't know whether it's a separate issue or tangled in with this one, but I think some other people brought it up before, and that is we may need to talk a little bit about what defaults mean, as in if something is non-configured but has a Yang default, because I think we're implicitly thinking this is all, we're talking about explicit config, and I don't know whether we need to, in the same issue or a separate issue, when we're talking about override, talk about defaults.
Well, that was the previous issue. We were talking about deleting values from a template so that the default could become visible again.
Yeah, we just may want to be explicit in here then to say that when we say local config overrides template config, I don't know if we may want to put in here just a little chart of what it means when something's explicitly set versus at its default value and what's used. So
okay,
I mean,
got you.
I can propose an answer, but like, you know, if
No.
nothing is set, then the local default takes effect.
Okay, yeah. So local config means explicitly configured, not anything regarding default, Yang default.
Yeah, so the Yang default would only be used if it's not set in the template or local.
Correct. Whoops. Hit the wrong button there. All right, good clarification. Good for scoring?
Maybe I can still add a comment on this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I just wanted to react on the fact that the template, it was said that the template should be able to override the specific configuration of the consumer. Well, if this is the case, just don't configure anything in the consumer, and by nature, the template will be there. So if you configure something in the consumer, that should override the template. if you don't want to override the template, don't write anything in the consumer. At least don't write this data node in the consumer. So I think that's how it should work. Thanks.
So I've opened the poll on this. Just because
Can I
we do
also
have
add
a
a
couple
quick
of people-
comment?
We do have a few people in queue. So Kent, I'm going to, should I close the poll, or do you want to, and maybe try to get other issues, or do you want to keep going down this one?
Well, can people, someone was just trying to say something, so it sounded.
Yeah, we had 2 or 3 people in queue. I just,
Yeah.
it wasn't clear to me we were changing anything. So I thought it would be good to get the poll so we could move on.
Yeah, I agree.
But we have Shia and Deepak.
Mm-hmm.
So
Shia?
Yeah. So I wanted to, so for the defaults and the second point that Robert added, I am fully in line with that, but I also wanted to say for the consumers, similar to the defaults, you can also have mandatories, and what happens to the mandatory is are the consumers forced to override the mandatory default data nodes each time? Isn't that also something that we have to address here?
No.
When we say talk about overriding.
Yeah. So I mean, okay. So good point. But in my mind, the mandatory statement isn't looked at until the configuration's been fully expanded in intended. So only after it's been fully expanded in intended, then full Yang validation occurs, which considers mandatory and ensures that any mandatory leaf is in fact configured.
But Ken, this is so when you talk about a consumer is an IETF interface Yang. So you cannot. Is it possible that we can configure an interface which does not have a mandatory that are not defined? That is against today's rule, right? It's the consumer that I'm talking now. So if I'm defining an interface, okay, the interface can get some data nodes from a template, but the interface data model as such is defined in IETF interface.yang, and there you can have mandatory data nodes.
Mm-hmm.
And so we say these are mandatory data nodes, right? So we say that this will not be configured, then that's against IETF interface.yang, right? Or yeah.
I'm not sure if we're in disagreement. Absolutely. If any Yang module says a leaf is mandatory, then that leaf must be configured in the flat and expanded configuration in intended.
So I suggest Deepak make his comment, and then we move on. There's
yep, agreed.
Of those participating, there's unanimous support for requirement 6.
Thank you. Number 7, modifiability of data.
Deepak was going to make a comment first.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Deepak.
So yeah, I was just wondering about the mandatory statement. So essentially what we are saying is, okay, 2 points. One is we were talking about the intended, then essentially we are talking about the NMDA here. And the second point is, if we say we have to configure in the mandatory leaves, then what we're talking about is, if say I have tens and hundreds of template consumers pointing to a particular template, then what I'm essentially saying is all I need to do, it's mandatory for me to configure all these tens and hundreds of template consumers just for that one mandatory node, right?
No.
Even though the remaining nodes can refer to the template, but because of this one node, which is a mandatory, I'm supposed to configure all the consumers.
Or you could put it once in the template, then all the consumers get that node, and it satisfies the mandatory.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's right.
Okay.
All right, let's move on. Number 7, modifiability of data within a template, living templates. Requirement. It must be possible to modify the data, add, modify, delete. Interesting, the word delete is showing up again. Data nodes, defined in an already existing template, irrespective of whether there are references to it or not. If there are references to a template, then the modified template data should get expanded for all of its existing references. Okay, that second sentence is what really, for me, ties into the title. The first sentence, well, first off, the word delete is problematic, but secondly, it's talking about already existing template irrespective of whether or not they're referenced or not. So this isn't an issue of whether or not a template is referenced. It's just basically saying, if we allowed templates to, the template reference, the reference to the template is long-lived. It's like in the configuration. It's not you set the template once and then the template is destroyed and, any relationship to the template is lost. These are long-lived relationships between the template consumer and the template. So I'm going to edit this one just a little bit. I really think we should probably just focus on that second sentence because it's the one that really calls out. If there are references to a template, then the modified template data should be expanded for all of its existing. Like, I don't know. I probably would rewrite that maybe a little bit. Modifiability data with
Can I have a comment on this?
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So the delete there is, for me, it is not something. The delete that we have discussed earlier. The delete that we have discussed earlier was to have a capability for the consumer to delete or to not apply a data node that is coming from the template. And then you need at the consumer some kind of an operator that will tell, okay, I will delete this data node that is, even if it is present in the template. But here what I'm saying is that you have a template data node that is configured in the configuration data store. Now in that template, I want to delete or modify a data node. This is just a normal Yang operation. It is not the delete that we were discussing earlier, according to me. Yeah? So.
Well, I think it is because if the template didn't want the value to be set, then either it doesn't set the value itself, so there's no reason to delete it because it didn't set it, or you're saying that the template got the value because it came from another template, but that's exactly the issue we discussed before about whether or not.
Kent, I don't think so. I think he's talking about. I think he's talking about you've got a config with a template, and now you go edit the template to remove MTU. That's that delete.
Which
is
okay.
fine.
I misunderstood.
It's just edit config, yeah.
I see. Yeah. So any standard, the template can be modified in any way, right? Any user could edit. It's just config. So what config you have in it, in your edit config, you can do whatever you want. Add, remove, change values, template values. Is that yes. What you're trying to say here? Is that what this issue is about, or is this issue the living templates? Like it's long-lived.
My intention was that if you have a template that is configured already and you want to change that template on the fly, all the consumers should get this modification automatically applied.
Okay.
So Kent, I think there's two ways you can apply templates. One is they get applied as a one-off event, so that when the template's applied, the config's effectively replicated out. And after that, if you change the template, it doesn't change any of the existing users of that template. I don't like that style. The other one is like this, which is probably what you're thinking of, is the template is always there. So if you change the template, obviously everywhere it's being used, all its instances of that template also ought to have to be updated at the same time, as in everything has to stay in sync.
Yes. I'm going to clarify the title and say templates are long-lived, and thus modifications are to them cascade to all consumers instantly. Consumers instantly cascade. Is that clearer?
Personally, it's less clear for me.
I'm sorry.
And also, I object to instantly.
Okay.
Because you know, it's not magic, right? It takes processing time.
At commit time?
True.
And
Yeah.
this modification of them cascade to all consumers at commit?
Yes, I'll make that.
Or automatically. And you know, I also would prefer that we try to stick with terms we have. So cascade, how about applied?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Or reapplied? Actually, I'd like reapply to all modules that they were previously applied to. That's not good English either. We need a little wordsmithing on this, I think. I also long-lived doesn't, you know, again, do we have a defined term of what long-lived means? Persistent?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
And I'd drop the word thus.
Mm-hmm.
And modifications to them are or need to be automatically applied.
Yeah, I don't like the need to be part of it because
How about are?
Yeah, well, this says the same thing.
This is requirements.
Yeah, it's there. Modifications to them automatically apply. I could add the word are, but I don't think it's necessary.
So I think the difference is that there is they are applied as opposed to they are relevant. I think there's a little bit of a opportunity for misreading.
Okay, is that better?
Yes, I think that captures what I heard the discussion to be.
Okay.
If anyone objects or wants a different modification.
No, that sounds good. Let's do the poll.
All right, no objections. Good participation.
Nice.
Ready to move on.
Number 8, support basic programmatic elements in templates. Templates should support conditional expressions and loops, ranges. For instance, being able to iterate over a set of objects. These constructs should be able to operate on variables in addition to Yang data models. Non-requirements. Andy suggested that XPath for these, for instance, conditionals could be done similarly to when clauses. XPath is likely already supported by servers. Actually, I don't know. Yeah, whatever. That said, XPath notation might not be easily adopted. Okay, right. And so then a custom scripting language would be easier. This adds a lot of complexity in specification and implementation. It sounds like the suggestion here is that Yang templates should provide some sort of diluted flavor of XSL, where programmatic concepts such as loops and expressions through the data tree. Okay. I do recall there was at least one presentation, IETF 121, that discussed the ability to have programmatic expression, like a scripting language, in the templates. So certainly there's one supporter, or maybe, But I don't know if that's I mean, maybe we just need to do the show of hands to see how much support this has. I don't know. Any other comments, discussion?
Jason Stern, I really strongly feel, almost to your vehemently word, Kent, that we don't want this as part of the base. I mean, it might be an interesting idea for some follow-on work, but I just really think we can't put this in the base spec.
Yeah. Okay. All right, let's do this show of hands.
Yes,
The
looks
poll's
too much
running.
complicated for me. Robert Pesci speaking, it looks too much complicated for me, if I may add.
Yep. Great. Thanks, Robert.
So I don't hear anyone voicing support for this or see anyone voicing support for this. So I'd put this in a category as not in the first round.
Okay, next item, 9. Templates can be applied at various nodes in the schema. This requirement allows a template to be applied at any node in the schema, although we should also allow for an implementation to have limitation restrictions about which nodes can have the applied template. Some implementations may only allow them on list nodes, for example, and maybe we shouldn't preclude that. A corollary is that any node in the instance data has the possibility of having multiple template apply to that node. For instance, different templates could have been applied at multiple ancestor nodes. This works in combination with issue number 1 and would need precedence rules that take this requirement into account along with issue number 1. Non-requirement precedence rules when multiple templates apply to the given node. There are no other comments on this issue. I almost think that it has to be the case that templates can be applied at various nodes in the schema, and we say in the schema, but I think we really mean in the data tree. But it almost has to be the case, right? Because like I could have a list. Okay, my data model might have a list of devices, a top-level list of devices. Or maybe using my other example, graphics, a top-level list of materials, a top-level list of colors, a top-level list of textures, and so each of those, you might have a top-level container called colors, plural, and then inside of it there's a list, color, singular, and it's each of those color list items that you wish to have the template being applied to them on. So certainly, and there could be different parts in the data tree, right? So the materials and textures could also have their own. Anywhere there's a list, like at least the first list, right? The topmost, anywhere in the tree, starting from root, until you hit your first list, presumably. I mean, this topic talks about whether or not you can apply things that are not list items. Does it make any sense to apply a template to something that's not a list item?
We have a couple of comments in queue, including Jason, who opened this ticket. So maybe we should get to those comments.
Yep.
And then discuss more.
Yep.
Deepak is first.
Yeah. I understand that this apply template is for particular node, but what about if I want to apply a template for all the nodes? Am I saying that I need to apply this template for each and every node separately, or do I do it at a schema level, at a tree level, the complete model level?
Okay, so quickly, my understanding is that the template itself is hierarchical, like it can contain a full configuration data tree. And so when you apply the template, when the template consumer, it gets the whole hierarchy of config. It's not just applying it to like local container only, and then you have to like apply another template to like a descendant container and another template to yet another template container. Just a single reference to a template at the top post could be sufficient to supply all the template value. Is that what you had in mind or you wanted?
Yeah.
The right answer. Okay. Good. Others in queue?
Jason Stern. I'm realizing that sometimes with these issues, there's a few things that get entangled, along with some assumptions, just because I'm familiar with how these work. So he brought up an interesting point about whether you can apply a template at a root. I don't know if that's another issue, or that has to be, we'd probably just say it has to be at a root node. So if you have 10 root nodes, there's no way to apply it to all 10 of those. Like you probably have to apply it to the root level nodes themselves, other than the root. Haven't thought about that one too much, but I'm also realizing the way I phrase this one, I wonder if I should have flipped it around and made the issue said that implementations are free to reject application of templates at nodes. This one comes from, again, my understanding of a number of major implementations and just trying to get this standardized and actually available to operators. I know some implementations have limitations and can't always accept templates applied at every single node. And I just wanted to maybe try not to preclude that. So for example, I think we probably want to leave it free to servers to reject the application of a template at a node, or somehow have the spec not require it to be able to be applied at any and every node. Even though from the definition of the, like we've been talking about you doing this maybe through annotations or whatever, and those annotations technically could be specified on a node, but just as a very simple example, I'm not familiar with any implementations that accept a template applied to a leaf. And it should be okay that implementations can reject that. It could be that some don't allow it applied on user ordered by user lists. Like I just wanted to maybe consider that we don't preclude some of those server specific ability to reject template config on specific nodes.
And I'd raise the same comment that the last one that Jason had mentioned is that I'm not sure it makes sense to apply a template to a leaf, and maybe not a leaf list, I don't know, maybe it would. So I think there is a subset of nodes that you could apply a template to, or that makes more sense in terms of being containers and list elements. For example, one thing, and I don't know if it's captured elsewhere on the requirements, is whether you can apply a template to like a single interface versus a regex match on the keys versus applying to all list elements with given keys. I don't know if that's captured elsewhere as another requirement. That might be something that's worth considering.
I don't know either. Maybe you can yourself quickly look to scan that list. I don't want to jump right now because I'm looking at this issue at the moment, but it was presented at IETF 121 regex type, and I think maybe more than one presentation at 121 mentioned that ability. But yeah, going back to this issue, I'm trying to think how we can strengthen the title, perhaps. Templates can be applied at various nodes in the schema. So how about templates? Let's see. It must not be required that templates can be applied at all nodes in the data tree. And then, I'll just, okay, let me hit save here and add a comment to the effect
I think the positive statement is better than a negative.
Yeah, okay, please help me. Okay,
I thought I understood what the original language was going to based on the discussion. And I was okay with the original language, but if others aren't, we should think about keeping it in the positive.
How about it must be possible to constrain which
Just so you know, we have a whole bunch of people in queue. So maybe while you're writing, we can go to Robert.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'll also point out that we are, we have 10 minutes left. This will probably be the last issue we have time for. So.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just maybe to say a few things. First, template normally applies to repetitive piece of data nodes. So I don't believe that scalar object, to speak in SNMP terms, are really the purpose of a template, because templates, I repeat, should be repetitively applied to different consumers. For instance, a list of consumers all copying one single template with small variations possibly. So I think that templates application should be, there should be quite a freedom to what someone should put in a template, not necessarily the whole tree of the device. And okay, also, I repeat, for things that are normally to be replicated in the system. Thank you.
Were there others in the queue?
They dropped. I
Oh,
thought
okay.
Jason was in there, and I was interested in his comment to your
Okay.
title
Well,
page. But we lost him.
Jason, I'm tweaking your title.
I'm pondering it.
I'm tweaking your title.
I was somewhat in favor of reversing it to a negative title, but
oh shit.
I
guess,
can, if that's the consensus, that's consensus. Let's go negative.
Well, but just let me just do another phrasing to make sure that other people are still thinking the same thing I am. It's kind of like it must be acceptable for servers to reject templates, on certain nodes. It's kind of a weird requirement, though, right? I'm not intending to just break it and like we don't want a server to say, yeah, I support templates, and they reject it on 100% of the nodes. But I think it should somehow be acceptable that a server has constraints on which nodes it can accept templates on.
Yeah, I mean, I think your point about it not making sense to apply a template to a leaf is,
yeah, it's not just a leaf, though. I think I think we want to be a little careful there. I think there's going to be other constraints that aren't as obvious. So,
yeah. Well, I think the RFC needs to be clear about this. It wouldn't be on a server by server or an implementation on an implementation basis. The RFC needs to be clear, which nodes can be template consumers.
Well, I was going further than that. I think so. So I know. Okay, so I know more than one major implementation accepts them on some lists and not on others. I don't know all the rules as to why. But
do you know why?
No, but Junos has it too, Kent.
Oh yeah.
Apply groups don't apply. You don't apply to all lists.
Yeah.
So just looking at the data model. Same with Nokia. I think there's some internal implementation reasons it doesn't always apply. So I'm worried about doing a spec that requires any major rework to major implementations. It'll just be a lot harder to get it out there and usable by operators.
I agree with that.
So that's what I'm getting at.
That doesn't run counter to what Kent said. Kent said it has to be specified as part of the definition of templates.
Well, no, because I think
there's a class of things that won't work, then it won't work for many people.
Yeah, I just think, those are going to be a little bit different for different implementations is my worry. So I'm not sure it's going to be as simple as the spec saying all lists shall support the apply groups statement. Because I've seen multiple implementations that don't do that. So I was trying to open up the possibility for some flexibility on the server side on this.
Yeah, it'd be. I'm super curious as to why that's the case with Junos. I don't know. I wasn't in that team, so I don't have inside knowledge. But my simple way of thinking about templates is that it's a very generic type operation. It almost doesn't matter what list it is. It's just a flattening, expanding, very generic type approach. And at the end of the day, you have the flattened config, and that's what gets applied. And
Well,
so
it's not the case for our implementation either.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I don't know all the details either, and I don't know if other implementers have comments on this or know their implementation well enough to comment on that.
Yeah, well, I think we could probably carry that forward in discussion, but the title as it stands currently, you know, I can see it that we would constrain the solution to be that not any node in the entire data tree can have an applied group or whatever, applied template statement. I mean, there's some limits, like maybe we don't support leaves, maybe we don't support root node. I don't know.
In the interest of time, I'm starting the poll because we're rapidly running out of time.
Okay. Yeah. I was more thinking that, Kent, this is a market decides thing. Like the spec may allow it anywhere, and different implementations may have more or less flexibility on where they allow it. That's more what I was proposing. So.
So I think we're getting reasonable responses supporting this requirement. For me, I'm the one no vote because to me it was not written tightly enough to be a requirement. It's just too open to interpretation. You know, is it applying to the mechanism? Is it applying to implementation? It was too vague for me to be comfortable with. But that said, the majority of the folks on the call are saying, yes, they support this requirement. And I think we should close this requirement and figure out how you want to close the meeting, Ken.
Yeah, okay. And also, I'm the only no opinion vote here, mostly because I actually don't know how I feel if it should or should not be the case that you could any node could be a template consumer. But that's besides the point. I think we've gotten to the end of what we can review today. There are 7 more issues, so we basically made it halfway through. We need another meeting to be able to complete this review. By the way, I think this was very helpful. Discussion was great. I'm really, I think it's good that we're getting these show of hands, you know, to drive some understanding of how people feel about the various requirements. So very productive so far. How to move forward to review these remaining items. A couple of choices I'll throw out there if people have others. One is that we could try to quickly do another virtual interim before 122. 2, and I don't know if it's too late, but Lou and I, chairs, could request perhaps a special session, another 1-hour session at 122. Or 3, we could do a virtual interim after 122.
Kent, I actually did not put in the request over the weekend as I usually do because we have a meeting today and I was going to bring this up. So I'd like to suggest that we request the 2nd-hour session just for this. And we can always, if we find we don't have a need for it, we can cancel it.
Sure.
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean the session request. I meant the announcement for the session. The session requests are in, and we'll see what Mahesh says about adding a 1-hour session. At this date, it would require AD approval.
Okay, I am doing another poll. Do you plan to go to IETF 122 in Thailand? Because I think in order to have a successful session, we'd want most of the people that's on this call to be present. And yes, they could dial in remotely, but it could, you know, it may not be easy for everyone. So
I think you might want to hear from Mahesh because he may say at this late date and the schedule's so tight, no way, just do it informally. Mahesh?
Yeah, I mean, I think putting it into, let me check. There might be a 1-hour slot on Friday that can be accommodated.
Maybe we should just do it as a breakout session How about if we just
Yeah.
finish the poll and we'll do it as a side session, and we'll do a poll.
Another option, guys, is because it's a subset of issues now, maybe we just encourage everyone to go into the issue tracker and put comments, because it's a lot smaller of a problem space now. It's narrowing down. So,
but I'd like the show of hands.
If you look at the poll, we're split. So I think the in-person thing isn't going to work. So I threw that idea out, and I'm going to I put it out there, and I'm going to kill it immediately. Let's do an interim.
Yeah, and I think we can do an interim before 122. Like virtual interims, they only need 1 week notice for scheduling. So if we try to schedule something for next week, it's possible.
I think that would be a good idea if we find a spot next week, for instance, just like today, even shorter. It's very efficient, I found.
Okay, so after this call, I'll send out a doodle poll to hopefully all of our participants. Let me see if I can make sure I get everybody. And if everyone can reply to that doodle poll, then we'll pick the time that everyone agrees to.
Kent, you're going to send it to the list, right?
Oh, yes, you're right. I'll do it that way. Much better.
Thank you.
Yes, to the NETMOD list. Everyone, please be monitoring NETMOD list. Doodle poll will be sent in about an hour. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for participating on this call. Again, very productive, and one more meeting, and we'll probably have the list complete, and then be able to move forward and producing a document that can be published. Lou, as co-chair, would you want any closing comments for Mahesh as AD?
Other than to say thank you for running a successful meeting. Really appreciate the leadership, Kent, as well as the participation contribution by everyone on the call.
Yeah.
bye all.
Thanks, everyone. I think it was very productive.
Okay, great. Thank you. Have a good rest of the day.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.